Sick buildings. A World Health Organization study has revealed that up to 30% of new or remodeled buildings could cause sick building syndrome, SBS. The syndrome, which is blamed on substandard air quality in enclosed spaces, is difficult to diagnose. This is because it results in not just one illness, but a variety of eye, nose, and skin problems, chest and lung infections, and other symptoms that often resemble the common cold. It is often only when a sufferer is away from the sick building that it becomes clear SBS was to blame. SBS poses significant problems in healthcare facilities. Some infections caused by SBS put patients with weakened immune systems at serious risk. The number of these infections could be reduced by improving the design of healthcare facilities and their ventilation systems. Mold, carbon monoxide, and toxic fumes from materials such as flooring and paint all contribute to the poor air conditions that lead to SBS. Many hospitals try to address this by, for example, putting in flooring made from natural materials and using non-toxic cleaning products. The Dell Children's Medical Center of Central Texas was designed with air quality in mind. The center has 6 open courtyards full of vegetation that serve as its lungs. An advanced intake system brings air into the building from the protected courtyards, where sources of pollutants, such as smoking and gasoline-powered lawn mowers, are prohibited. Other healthcare facilities are following this example, also hoping to create an SBS-free environment.
精神的に辛い時に頼るのが臨床心理。
Clinical psychology. A recent study led by University of Wisconsin professor of medicine Timothy Baker shows that many clinical psychologists do not consider scientific research relevant to their work. According to the report, the majority of clinical psychologists give more weight to their personal experiences than to science, which can result in mistaken diagnoses and ineffective treatments. Baker compares the current state of clinical psychology to the practice of medicine before the 1900s. Until that time, most doctors viewed medicine as an art, not a science, and relied on intuition rather than proven scientific methods. This led them to apply treatments that were not only ineffective, but also harmful to patients. While current psychological therapies are less damaging than those early medical treatments, Baker believes many are equally ineffective. Clinical psychologists practice an array of questionable therapies, ranging from dolphin-assisted therapy to meditation therapy, with little concrete evidence of their merits. Baker and his colleagues blamed this state of affairs partly on mistaken assumptions by clinical psychologists. About a third of patients improve no matter what therapy they receive, but psychologists assume these successes result from their treatments. Furthermore, Baker points to the lack of sound scientific education for clinical psychologists. Many postgraduate psychology programs neither offer scientific training nor attempt to teach students the value of scientific inquiry. This means many clinical psychologists are not trained to administer treatments, such as cognitive behavior therapy, which eases depression as well as many other mental disorders, that have been scientifically validated through clinical trials. One way to improve the standard of treatment, according to Baker, is to establish a new accreditation system for institutions offering programs in clinical psychology. He specifically targets for-profit schools that offer programs leading to a PsyD, or Doctor of Psychology degree. Baker feels these programs, which usually have no connection to universities, do not offer enough scientific training. This, he says, explains why graduates of PsyD programs are less likely to practice scientifically proven treatments than holders of a university-granted PhD or Doctor of Philosophy degree in clinical psychology. Again, there is a strong similarity to medicine prior to the early 20th century, when many doctors in the United States received their qualifications from diploma mills. These were institutions that offered little scientific training and so were accused of basically selling medical degrees. In the end, a group of scientifically trained doctors formed an organization that campaigned for the improvement of substandard medical schools and the introduction of strict accreditation requirements, which were eventually put in place. Baker hopes the field of psychology will follow a similar path. Still, some psychologists argue that PsyD programs should not become more like PhD programs. Supporters of current PsyD programs insist their usefulness lies precisely in their focus on clinical practice rather than scientific training. They point out that even the Doctor of Medicine degree is, to a large extent, practice-oriented, and claim that PsyD holders are more competent in clinical settings than PhD holders. John Norcross, psychology professor at the University of Scranton, believes there is merit to both PsyD and PhD programs, and encourages students considering a career in clinical psychology to recognize the diversity in training and the inevitable trade-offs between them.
これでこの CD は終わりです。
Reality TV.
Hi, Joe. Do you want to go to a movie on Saturday?
I can't. Actually, I'm going to be a contestant on a new TV quiz show, and I have to go to a rehearsal.
How much are they paying you to participate?
Nothing. But we get a free dinner afterwards.
Nothing. TV companies seem to be getting really mean. It's like all those cheaply made reality TV shows featuring amateurs.
But they're really popular. My little sister is addicted to them.
I think the companies are just exploiting the people in them. I hear they only cost a fifth of those dramas with an array of famous stars being paid extravagant fees.
Maybe. But if the show catches on, then the people in them can rack up huge earnings. That is because advertisers are prepared to pay more.
Yeah, but once the novelty wears off, viewing figures drop. They can't bank on remaining popular for long.
Still, some of them are just like documentaries, only more entertaining. Mind you, I wouldn't want to be in one. Just appearing in a quiz show will be stressful enough.
Don't worry, I'm sure you'll sail through it.
イングランドの東に毎年多くの旅行者が
A holy site. Hi, Jane. Did you have a good weekend?
Great, thanks. We visited a place called Walsingham in Norfolk.
I've heard of it. Isn't it famous because Catholic pilgrims used to go there to worship some deceased saint?
Well, it was actually part of the cult of the Virgin Mary. A pious medieval aristocrat had a vision of Mary and built a shrine to her. It became famous throughout Europe. It is mentioned in lots of inscriptions in other churches.
Wow. I bet it became pretty luxurious then.
It did. With the donations from the pilgrims, 2 big monastic houses were built, as well as a majestic shrine. The shrine had quite an inventory of relics, including a sample of Mary's milk.
Are the buildings still there?
No, when England became Protestant, Henry VIII decided to dissolve the monasteries. He ordered the forced closure of the site. All the buildings were torn down and the shrine was vandalized. The abbot was forced to accept demotion to being a mere servant of the king.
That's pretty tragic. I guess Henry wanted the wealth for himself.
That's a bit cynical, but certainly many people were upset at the destruction of the shrine.
一口に英語といっても歴史や文化を
British English in America. Over time, as the economic and cultural power of the United States has grown, more and more American phrases and idioms have entered British English. Many British people react to such Americanisms with annoyance, remembering a time when the Queen's English was regarded as the yardstick for correct usage. They consider such Americanization a disastrous threat to the purity of the language. To such conservative people, American English remains a crude or even defective dialect which should be avoided. Even using a term like movie instead of film can still set off angry complaints about the invasion of the language they cherish by such alien terms. Now, though, these people can console themselves with the fact that the influence is starting to go the other way. According to Ben Yagoda, who runs a website which tracks the use of British English in the United States, this reflects the increasing popularity of British books, movies, and TV shows. The biggest difference is that no one in the U.S. condemns this tendency as a calamity. British English still tends to sound educated and sophisticated to American ears. Moreover, some British terms have no obvious counterpart in the States. Far from endangering American English, the adoption of these expressions is seen as an enrichment of the language. Perhaps the British could learn something from this attitude.
残忍な海賊として悪名高いウィリアム・キッド。
A pirate of the Caribbean? The British pirates of the 17th century, who made their livelihoods by falling on ships at sea and carrying away their cargoes, have always fascinated later generations. One of the most notorious of these pirates was Captain William Kidd. After his trial and execution, Kidd became a legend, and he was popularly believed to have carried out many brutal acts of theft and slaughter. However, recently historians have uncovered evidence that Kidd was probably not a pirate at all, but a privateer. This referred to someone who was authorized by the king to attack and rob ships belonging to Spain and France, both enemies of Britain at that time. Kidd's problems began when he attacked a ship that was sailing under French protection. His attack was legal and should have been endorsed by the British government. However, the ship was in fact not French, but Armenian. Moreover, the owners had employed an Englishman as captain. This man immediately sent messages home, and Kidd was officially declared a pirate. He sailed to Boston, but was betrayed there by a local friend and taken into custody. He was sent to England, where he was prosecuted and convicted. The witnesses at the trial were bribed to discredit his claims, and he was executed. The full truth may never be known, but the exaggerations of these corrupt witnesses led to his later reputation as one of the fiercest pirates ever to have menaced the seven seas.
女性の痩せたいという願望はどこから
America's obsession with thinness. America's models and actresses seem to get thinner every year, and so naturally their female fans also yearn to be thin. The result is a $70 billion dieting industry. Despite the criticisms of many people, especially feminists, the fashion industry continues to dictate an unrealistic criterion of beauty. Thus, many women continue to be dissatisfied with their own shape and to experience an irresistible urge to lose weight. Yet, until the 19th century, a plump body, far from being a source of disgrace, was seen as wholesome and attractive. So what made American women begin to aspire to being impossibly thin? According to Sarah Lohman, a historian, Americans were originally much stouter than Europeans. This was because they were able to feast on the abundant food produced on their extensive territory. Then, the ideal of beauty began to change, and a prejudice against plump people developed. As the country grew wealthier, many people became more bulky. The growth of food science created a greater awareness of the importance of fitness and moderation in eating. Clothing began to be made in fixed sizes,